It's a beautiful day. Let the children play. They ain't feeling no pain. It's a beautiful day. Wake up in the morning, it's a wonderful feeling. It's good to be living, feel it all in my spirit. Time to get it, gotta.
Yo, what's up? What's up? Carl West again, back at you with Speak the Truth with Carl West. Yep, that's me. Now I need you to subscribe, share, hit the notifications, hit the like, thumbs up, whatever you got to do. I just need you to do it so you can be on top of this video. Now look, we're going straight in. Straight in. What is war? Yep. What is war? The entire world is at war when you really think about it. War isn't just physical, people going hand in hand combats. There's a mental war, there's a spiritual war, there's a psychological war, and of course there are physical wars. Wars with crime, wars with whether it's white collar criminals. Of course, there are big wars going on in other countries like Ukraine and Russia and others. But everywhere there's war, there are war in the communities. I want to talk about that. There's a war going on in communities. There's a war going on in households. There's a war going on blocks, streets, in cities and in states. And we have to remember that. And I'm using this to talk about the casualties because we tend to act like that we can eradicate war. Or I hear people talking about we got to eliminate violence. There's no such thing. As long as there's war going on all over the place, again, within your homes, within blocks, within communities, states, and countries, and the war that's going on within yourself, there's going to always be casualties. And there's always going to be war. We can't get away from that. So we got to, in some respects, give ourselves a little grace, especially when you're in communities where there's violence. And I think it's just, I always just freak out when I hear people just going nuts when there's some weekend stats of 10 shot, 5 murdered, and acting as though it's an unusual thing. We look at Ukraine, there are hundreds of thousands of people who've been murdered in Ukraine over the last few years. And then I'll hear people freak out about 5 being murdered over a weekend after 10 being shot. And then a cumulative, they'll say, oh, well, 400 people have been murdered in a year in a major city like Chicago, New York, or LA, or whatever the case may be. But yet, 100,000 people, again, 200,000 people have died in the war between Ukraine and Russia. And they act like they don't see that as being the same. That's even worse. And then they try to act like the communities, predominantly black communities, we are communities that don't understand human behavior. I don't understand how to just live in peace. But again, there's a war going on everywhere. And within war, there will be casualties. There are wars going on to save poverty, to eradicate poverty. There's war going on to eradicate or decrease homelessness. Again, there's wars going on everywhere. And we have to understand that when there are wars in the streets of an urban community like Chicago, again in New York and LA, there will always be casualties. I learned this really the hard way because I've always been a fan of war movies. And I remember watching these more war movies, and I would hear the generals and the sergeants talk about that they got to send out 50,000 troops to go do battle. But behind that, they would say, well, we also know we have to have 10,000 body bags. Those will be the casualties. And they were so cavalier about it as though they understand that this is the nature of war. So understanding that there's war going on everywhere where there's war, there will be casualties. And the most important thing they said in these movies were these wars sometimes are necessary and most times they are not. But regardless, that these wars are taking place. And again, within war, I repeat, there will be casualties. And they said we can't spend our time really talking about the casualties. We have to respect them. We have to give their families an opportunity to mourn them. This is when these are war-torn situations, like in the armed forces, right? They're talking about this in the war movies. We have to give families the space and the time to mourn their lost loved ones through war. But what we have to focus on more than anything is how do we heal the wounded? How do we bring the ones who returned back from war? How do we help the ones who have survived the wars in urban communities, in trailer park communities? How do we help the ones who have recovered when a white-collar criminal took hundreds of $millions from them? How do we help the wounded recover? They talk about that being the most important part. You cannot spend all your time grieving about the person or situations or money in the space of the white-collar criminal. Sometimes war come from that because people kill themselves when they lost their life savings. We can't spend time really concerned with the people who have lost their lives in war. Again, you give the families the time to mourn, but we have to focus more of our attention, 80% of our attention, 90% of our attention is how do we heal the wounded, the ones who come back from all these different types of psychological, mental, physical, spiritual wars. How do we give them the proper things that they need to get their head back in the game, to recover from war so they can become a part of society again and hopefully to go on living as normal of a life as possible? We have to focus on that and not spend so much time pointing fingers all the time. There are situations where you can point the fingers in terms of who started the war, how did this, who created this, who ignited it. It doesn't change the facts. We hope that we can be preventive in the future of starting wars. But with wars being everywhere, you can't stop it. How do we heal the wounded and let the casualties rest in peace? How do we do that? What is war? War is death. War is loss of life, loss of money, loss of soul, loss of mental capacity. How do we help those people who have been injured and hurt in war recover? That's what we should be focused on. I'm Carl West. Speak the truth. I'm out.
Day, let the children play. They ain't feeling no pain. It's a beautiful day. Wake up in the morning, it's a wonderful feeling. Good to be living, feel it all in my